This session is going to focus on self-employment, and especially we will be looking at skills development policies, looking at trainings, counselings, and mentoring. I would like to welcome everyone, but most especially our distinctive panel. We have Mrs. Elka Dimitrova, Director of Labor Market Policy Directorate from Bulgaria. We have Mr. Timothy Lubanga, who is Assistant Commissioner in the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda. And we have Mr. Dala Korkoyah, who is Monitoring and Evaluation Director in the Ministry of Gender and Development in Liberia. Welcome to our session, and we are very happy to count your expertise today. So before I pass to the presentation to the country examples, which is the more interesting part, I will just like to very briefly set the stage and just take 2 or 3 minutes in reminding everyone of why do we care about this session. In the countries we work with, promoting employability and promoting productivity is very high in the agendas. And this is especially for the most vulnerable population, and among, including men, women, but especially youth. And I think, as the discussion in day one has showed, there are many constraints to the creation of wage employment. And it's not only related with labor regulations, there are many other constraints. So policymakers are really faced with a situation where, in order to accommodate a large number of people entering each year in the labor market, and we've seen that this is especially a problem in some regions of the world, like here in South Asia, but also in Africa, self-employment ends up being de facto what people end up working on. So in this chart, you again have an idea of how important is self-employment in the world for the countries we work with. In low and middle income settings, we have not more than 55% of the population in wage employment. And this number compares with around 85% in high income settings. So the question is really, what can we do as early as possible to promote high productivity and employability for this group of people that does not end up in wage employment? And if you see in this table, we actually have a breakdown for those who are not wage employees, and the purple bars at the top show the share of people who are self-employed. So these numbers can be as high as 50% in Africa and clearly above 30% in South Asia and East Asia. So the motivation is very clear. We need to understand how to increase productivity among this group in the population. So what do we know, just looking at the different programs from around the world? The bank is working actively on this, and we have done, we are actually conducting an inventory, and there's a very diverse portfolio of interventions that we can have. These range from training programs to advisory services, having access to networks, credit, access to value chains, micro-franchising, you name it. There's many interventions available. And moreover, if you focus on a specific interventions, there's also a lot of diversity in how they are actually implemented. Just think about the case of trainings. There are many different types of trainings regarding the content. There's a lot of different course lengths. Some last 1 week, others 3 months. There's definitely a lot of diversity in the cost of providing these trainings. Part of it is because the quality of the teachers is also very diverse. So faced with this diversity, what we internally had to face is, what examples are we going to showcase in this session for you? This was not easy. We had basically limited time, and why did we pick these 3 examples? It was definitely not by chance. We wanted to pick 3 examples that were diverse and that illustrated well this point that I just made, that countries have very different contexts, and what's good in one setting is not necessarily good in the other. So we selected the example of Bulgaria, that, as you know, it's an ex-Soviet country that has traditionally been having a lot of centralized administration in their own programs by the history of the country itself. We are going to showcase the public trainings that are promoting self-employment. And there, the focus has been on reasonably skilled individuals. There's a nationwide coverage, and the program provides a very wide set of skills. Again, I think an important point in the case of Bulgaria is that it's an example of a case of where there's a centralized administration, in this case under the National Employment Action Plan. And then we decided to pick two examples that somehow contrast with Bulgaria. It's the case of Uganda and Liberia, two post-conflict settings, but also two very diverse economies. As you know, Uganda, it's a labor market that is functioning well, where information is flowing. And even though this program is in a post-conflict area, it allowed a lot of autonomy to their participants. And I think this is one of the features why it's so interesting. So it provided a cash transfer to the groups of under and unemployed, and allow them basically to use this cash transfer to either invest in vocational trainings or to buy training in business assets. So it's a very decentralized model in a country that also has reasonably good institutional capacity. It has also a very strong impact evaluation, which is something that it's appealing for us, since we will be able to look at how effective it was. In Liberia, it's also a very interesting example because it's an example of a post-conflict setting. As you know, the country has been involved in two important civil wars. Property rights are still a very important issue. The lack of rule of law, it's also still a very important program. So we want to understand how in these very vulnerable settings, whether we can promote self-employment among the most vulnerable. And the target here are young women aged 16 to 27, and most of them are illiterate. So, which I think it's a very important feature. And again, that starts in contrast with the example of Uganda, but certainly also with Bulgaria. The training is basically on skills, development, job skills, and also life skills. And again, the project has done an impact evaluation. So with this introduction, I would like to give the word to Bulgaria to start with. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank the World Bank for the invitation to participate in this forum. I will speak about three examples in Bulgaria, the main obstacles and the lessons learned. As you know, Bulgaria is member of the European Union, a small country. This is important because we receive funding from the European Social Fund. It is very crucial for the funding of the programs. Our country is with a population about 7.3 million. As you see, we are a bit bigger than Hyderabad. But the activity rate isn't so high, the employment also. The unemployment is about 12%. We have now problems because of the economic and financial crisis. Well, what we do, since 2000, we develop every year a national employment action plan with the funding from the state budget. And this is a plan, a big document with many parts for the target groups, the funding of each program, the rules of the program, also the rights and the duties of the institution and the social partners for the implementation of this plan. Part of this plan are the services and the programs to set up a new business. And on this slide, I present the classic pathway to start a new business. This is the perfect pathway. In the real life, it doesn't happen in such a complicated manner, but I put all kinds of services here that unemployed person can use. First of all, this is the information for the project and the possibilities. Then this person has to elaborate a business plan. With the help of a consultant, we reimbursed the services and the expenses of the consultants. We allow a limited lump sum. After the elaboration of the business plan, he is discussed by a commission and approved by this commission. After that, the person can receive a grant, a loan, or a lump sum. It depends on the situation and, for the different projects. In the same time, this person can participate in a training. It can be skill training or vocational training. Then is the start of the activities. And something important, after the start, during the first year, we reimbursed the social contributions of the new starter of this person, because during the first year it is difficult to have big revenues and it is difficult to pay social contributions. At least we allow him or her these contributions to be insured during the first year. Also, very important are the consulting services during the first year. As you know, the first year is crucial to survive for the small business. I will speak about 3 examples. The first is a project for promotion of the start of new project for self-employment. This is a scheme funded by the European Social Fund. The grants for one entrepreneur is about $13. You can see this is a big lump sum for Bulgaria. And we provide also training before the approval of the business plan. The training is for small and medium enterprises, some competencies for marketing, accountancy, bookkeeping, teamwork, and so on. 2-3 months is this training. But the most curious was that the unemployed that wanted to receive this money, they are surprised that they have to participate in a training and to make a business plan. They thought that we give the money and the most important is to have a big bag and to come in to the ministry to receive this money. Then we can see we trained about 12,000 people. It is a big number for Bulgaria, and 9,000 unemployed. The second example is the training vouchers, new practice for Bulgaria. I would like to say that in the beginning, before our membership in the European Union, the problem is the lack of money for the programs and measures on the labor market. And the administration, me too, I think that well, if I have money, it will be okay, and big number of people will participate in the programs, and unemployment will increase and so on. So when we don't have money, it's a problem, but when we have money, the problem is bigger. Because our employer didn't like to participate in the schemes, they didn't have the capacity to elaborate projects and to manage projects and so on. So we gave the initiative to the unemployed and employed people. So we gave training vouchers. This is like the voucher has the status as a banknote with nominal value according to the training. If it is vocational training, the value is bigger, and it is for key competencies is smaller value. The employment agency, our public employment service, provides the voucher for training, and we had a big number of applicants, and about 60,000 employees participated and received vouchers and used this kind of training. But the problem is that in the small towns, the choice of training providers is very limited. So this scheme was best for the big cities where the number of training providers is bigger. Also for the higher educated people, because they can choose the training and invest in themselves for their future employment. Sometimes people choose training for their hobby because they would like to go to Italy in holidays, and they take a voucher to study a bit Italian to manage when they go in Italy and so on. So the scheme not perfect, but it is important that we realized a big number of trainings for unemployed and also employed people. The third example is about project jobs. We realized this project during 10 years with the help of the United Nations Development Program and the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy of Bulgaria, the municipalities and other partners. Under the project were created 42 business centers in the rural areas, and the centers provide also training for vulnerable groups, different kind of training, even literacy, also vocational training, farming, construction for big keepers, also business skills to start a small new business. For example, the HERB initiative was developed for disadvantaged groups, included Roma population, and this was important for them because they received knowledge how to plant, also provision of seedlings for plantation, agronomist assistance, sales assistance, and so on. And it was very important for this population, the self-confidence that they can be a small, they can have small firms to start a small business and to have incomes, regular incomes, like the other employee in Bulgaria. The main obstacles, the main challenges, the programs, it is very difficult sometimes to implement we have good ideas, we have good objective, the target group is well choiced, but when we start the so-called nuts and bolts are very important. First of all, the lack of motivation for learning for those people. Also, the state budget is limited. The budget from the European Social Fund is not limited, but the rules are complicated and people sometimes cannot manage with the projects. Always we have some deadweight losses because the results for the well-educated are better, but sometimes they can manage themselves without the help of the state. It is very important the validation of the informal learning for the new starters. And we trained a bigger number of people than the number of the new starters after the training. The question about the balance between the theory and the practice and so on. Sometimes people like the prestigious training, for example, marketing, it sounds good. But for a small rural firm, it is important also to have knowledge about the resources, the local resources, the other businessmen in the area and so on. Then we have many lessons learned about our programs. We would like to increase the number of more innovative, high growth and ambitious new ventures than the traditional and stable. Maybe the skills are very important to increase the capability to detect opportunities and select the promising organizational and human competencies, knowledge, to turn ideas into action. It is very important, motivating people to work for you, the evaluation of the risk, and so on. Also, the entrepreneur from the small firms, they are very busy. They cannot participate in training during the week. So it's important to organize weekend or evening courses. Very important is to train the trainer with knowledge about the real life, not only the theory and deep books about economics. Very important is the participation of the sector employers, bodies, and in general the social partners. The access of disadvantaged group is also, this is like a slogan, but it is very important. We realized very successful small firms of disadvantaged group, the disabled people. Also, the support during the first year after the beginning is also very important. So, I will conclude with this sentence. The untrained entrepreneurs have to have access to the right supporting structures that will enable the seeds of enterprise to sprout and grow into fruit-bearing trees. Thank you for your attention.
Much, Mrs. Elka. So I think it was a very nice way to
a very nice presentation, and you finished, I think, putting emphasis in something that's very important, which is the challenge that many of these publicly provided trainings have in providing relevant training that is actually relevant in the labor market, which is also closely related with the difficulty of having good teachers, good business coaches that can provide this support to the groups. So I would pass the word now to Mr. Timothy Lubanga from Uganda. So the presentation is going to focus on the Northern Uganda Social Action Fund, specifically on the Youth Opportunities Program.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, all distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. The paper I'm sharing with you is about a program in Uganda called the Youth Opportunities Program, which was implemented from 2006 up to 2009. And we have now started implementing a second phase. And the first phase has been evaluated. We have done an impact evaluation. And so as part of this presentation, I will share with you also some of the findings and results that are coming out of the evaluation. In terms of context and background, there are a number of labor market challenges that this program faced or attempted to address. The program was designed for like half of the country, the northern part of the country, if you cut the country like into two, which had been affected by conflict. And so there was a lot of unemployment as a result of disruption in socio-economic activity. There was also gross unemployment and limited opportunities, especially for the youth and the able-bodied working persons, and a gross shortage of skills because the education system had collapsed. Most of the population was in camps for over 20 years, and many of the young people were actually abducted and taken into captivity. So this was the background to the project. There are several other market failures, shortage of goods generally and services in the region, proliferation of arms, negative externalities. There are a lot of people that had benefited from the war and were using young people for various wrong activities, and instability in the market, general shortage of supplies, price fluctuations, and so on. Therefore, it was important to come up with this program to address a number of challenges. And we thought this program would contribute to equitable development, poverty reduction, peace and stability in the region. The program itself, the objective was basically to support skills training activities for vulnerable youth and their communities and families. The main program intervention was covering 3 areas. One, strengthening local institutions, civil society organizations, NGOs, and so on, to support youth rehabilitation, if you like, through provision of training equipment, rehabilitation of training facilities, and provision of tools to the youth. The second element of the program was skills training, basically providing grants to cater for fees and all training requirements. And then provision of tools to each one who has been trained in a particular skill, including providing startup capital to enable them start a living. The time period I have already dwelt on. The main players were government, the World Bank, civil society organizations, and local community leadership. The overall program started in 18 districts, but later subdivided to 40 districts, and the second phase is actually covering now 55 districts. The total cost was approximately $7.5 million for that period. That's a typical example of idle youth in a facility that eventually was used to provide one of the training services. In terms of, again, in summary, the aim was to increase employment and incomes for the vulnerable youth and to increase community cohesion and reduce conflict. The indicators that we're interested in, outcome indicators, percentage of youth that were trained and acquiring productive assets, then percentage of targeted youth involved in meaningful economic activity. But we are now looking at also new indicators, changes in conflict as a result of this intervention, and other indicators on employment and income. I think I've dwelt a lot on this. Again, benefit package. The package of the intervention included a decentralized cash transfer program, providing grants to community groups selected locally by the local communities. And what the criteria here was that we used a lot of participatory approaches to support local groups to identify amongst themselves who were the right youth and the right kind of persons to benefit from this program. And through that mechanism, they were able to identify who they thought were the most appropriate to benefit. Each group was receiving a grant of about $5,000 to $7,000, which translated to about 377 averagely US dollars per person for each intervention. And again, it was mainly intended for acquiring skills and tools. In terms of management of the program, we had a project management team located within the region itself, and that was overseen by a steering committee. We also had roles and responsibilities assigned to district local government leaders, supervision, monitoring, and actually disbursement of the grants. All other aspects of the program, including procurement of the training requirements, of the materials, and of tools, were all done by the community groups themselves, the trainees themselves. So it was basically community procurement. And that is the same with contracting and payment of grants. Monitoring and supervision was varied. In some parts of the country, we had fairly well-organized monitoring mechanisms by the district leaders and civil society institutions. But in other parts, the groups were really left alone. Once they received the grants, they were provided with guidelines, and they kind of just went on their own, hired an institution, bought the training materials, using the syllabuses that were developed, conducted the training, and started the life on their own. But we had materials that guided them on who was supposed to play what role. In terms of challenges, there are quite a number of challenges. The first challenge was there was excess demand for grants. As I said, this is an environment where there had been war, and so a lot of things had collapsed. Government services had collapsed. Private providers were non-existent. So it was like a vacuum, an empty place. So when the program was introduced, these many young people who had been in camps for over 15, some of them had been born in camps. They had not gone to school. They had never seen any opportunities. Several of them had returned from abduction. So this was like one of the few opportunities they could get, so they quickly enrolled or applied. So there was excess demand for the program, and we only had a limited budget, so we couldn't cater for everybody. The second is the limited capacity of service providers. You are talking about training in skills like borehole repairs, bicycle maintenance, things like repair of mobile phones, and things like tailoring, carpentry, masonry, and so on. There weren't many institutions in this area that could train in this type of skills. So getting the right service providers was also a problem. Then weak capacity of local governments and difficulties in enforcement and supervision. Again, because of the war, public servants, public officials did not want to work in the local governments in those areas. So the local governments in those areas basically had the gross shortage of staff, and therefore there was nobody to do the supervision, to help the groups, and so on. Then low demand for services and economic opportunities generated. Again, because of the post-conflict environment, even the skills that were being provided sometimes could not meet the required demand in the market. So it was, you train so many girls in tailoring, but how many tailors do you really need in such an environment? A couple of tailors would be able to provide the services needed. Then others, the poorest persons were very difficult to reach because they don't come out. This was a demand-driven program, so it's the able-bodied again who come out. And how did we address this? Linking with other programs, providing capacity to the training providers, contracting out supervision, and engaging in market research and scaling up. As I conclude, these are some of the results of the impact evaluation of the first phase. We can clearly see that the percentage of youth engaged in skills work at the end of the program was much higher for the treatment group than the control group. The same results can be seen on savings levels. Those who received the training and the assets saved more, and also on market activities, participation in the market in terms of opening up a business and beginning to supply, for example, uniforms to a school and so on, and then monthly profits. Some other results to share. The economic impacts persist for men, though they do decline compared to the control group. And then the economic impacts for women increase over time. The gains are realized for a longer period of time. Results are better where local capacity is higher than where local capacity has been boosted. And the program must continue adapting to changes in the market and the environment. For example, the kind of skills required now due to changes in technology, increase in population, and so on, require that the program continues adopting, developing new modules, and so on. Few other lessons, almost my last slide. It's effective for poverty reduction, but not for social one. Remember, our objective was to try to increase social cohesion and also address the issue of poverty. So poverty, we succeeded, but cohesion, no. Cash transfers can be invested wisely by the poor. We have always thought maybe the poor cannot manage these things for themselves. Imagine this, a group of abducted people come together, no education, but they managed to deliver. And then they can earn reasonably high rates of return, but growth potential is modest. So while they may benefit a little bit, they are really not able to grow and upgrade to much higher levels. Economic success does not seem to be associated with significant social externalities. I've already explained that. And finally, that's the last slide. A few more lessons which we want to share with other participants for designing similar programs is that the importance of understanding the local environment and localizing the participatory approaches should not be underrated because for us, we think it is a key factor in the success of the project. And then there is need for flexibility in design and implementation mechanisms to suit socio-cultural context within which they are implemented. Like the example presented in the morning, where the presenter observed that even within India, the same program could not be applied in the same way across the whole country. We also realize that depending on the environment, we need that variance. And then these programs cannot work alone. Government must continue to provide services, good education, supporting environment for the private sector development and so on. Because they can only complement, they can only accelerate improvement of welfare of these young people, but they are not sufficient to address the problems. Madam Chair, I think I would like to stop there. And thank you very much. We are a team of 4. Maybe I'll just ask my colleagues to stand up. Sam, Willie, they are in other presentations. So we thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to your comments and learning also from you. Thank you very much.
We are the ones thanking you for sharing such a good presentation and such a good example. I think your presentation made a number of very, very good points. It's an example of how, in a context of a post-war situation, we can actually put in place a very decentralized program that seems with limited supervision was able to increase employability and productivity of youth at risk. I think you also made good challenges. You also noted important challenges, namely the issue of scalability. There's only a number of occupations that can be trained, that can exist in the local economy at some point in time, and I think this is an important point for our follow-up discussion. And I think this presentation also highlights the importance of having a good impact evaluation that allows us later on to quantify the effects and look at different groups. For example, you made the point that women seem to benefit more from this type of interventions than men, which I think we have found in also other countries. I'm thinking about the project with Marcelo also here in Argentina in the graduation of jefes, where women also benefited specifically from this type of support. So I would now pass the word to Mr. Dala Korkoyah from the Ministry of Gender and Development in Liberia, who is going to do a presentation on the very well-known Adolescent Girls Initiative, economic empowerment of adolescent girls and young women in Liberia. Thanks a lot.
What did you say?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We want to thank the World Bank for providing us this opportunity to share on the small project, small yet very successful project that we've run in our country, and also an opportunity to learn from the diverse background, the richness of wealth and experiences that have converged in this house to look at the issues of resilience and opportunity. I had an interesting discussion, conversation on the day of arrival with one of the hotel staff, and I thought I could share that. So in the lobby at the reception, I meet this young guy on the first day, and after the exchange of pleasantries, and he said, "By the way, what is the population of your country?" And then I said, 3.5 million. And he laughed. Then I said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, Hyderabad is almost 9 million. So just the population of a single city is more than twice the population of my entire country. I mean, that's the lesson he was giving to me. And following up on the comment from the Deputy Minister from Albania yesterday, Minister Sulka, when he talks about not focusing on the absolute numbers, but looking more at the relative successes of these individual achievements. Because if you contrast against India with such a humongous population, and you think these small projects in other countries, they are but drops in the ocean. But the relative successes that have been achieved by those projects, for me, they are the microcosm of success that we can count on to build the global achievements we are having in providing opportunity for people to escape the very challenges that they are faced by the shocks and rakes in various economies. Liberia, if there's any one thing a lot of us know about Liberia, there has been years of war, 2 successive wars. Right now, the country is on the road to economic and political recovery. Like the president said, the country has rounded the corner. So we are now on the path of prosperity. We are now on the path of stability. But what still remains is that this country carries the scars of devastation that the entire nation suffered during these 14 years of civil war. At one point during this period, we were classified as a failed state. So our current path of wars really brought our country down on its knees. When President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf took over the helm of power in 2006, Liberia at the time had some of the most appalling demographic or development indicators. More than 8% of the population lived below poverty line. School-age girls, more than half of them were not in school. Youth unemployment was a major challenge, still remains a major challenge. In fact, it's one of the major themes in the current development agenda for the government. It's a major focus for the government. Maternal mortality ratios around 994 per 100,000. Those are really like challenging description of the landscape, the socio-political landscape of Liberia those years ago. Madam Sirleaf prioritized investment in youth. In 2006, 2008, she signed up with the World Bank for what is known as the Global Adolescent Girls Initiative. Pilot initiative targeting particularly young girls, but in some countries they have mixed designs to suit the local context. The whole idea is to provide opportunity for young women to escape poverty, to escape the various challenges. And Liberia was one of the first initiatives. So the project that I'm going to make a presentation on tomorrow evolves out of that global arrangement called the AGI, which is in Liberia is founded by the World Bank, is funded by the Nike Foundation and the government of Denmark, but the administration is through the World Bank. Yesterday we were talking about the role of the World Bank. In our case, the World Bank plays a very important role in terms of technical backstabbing, in terms of technical support, mainly on, for example, the impact evaluation. What the project aims to do is to increase income and employment among young people, adolescent girls, 2,500. So you see the shared number, 2,500. Why this project is unique? I think it's fascinating that I just take us aback a little. The project focuses on girls. In our country, if you look at the labor market, for example, returns from the labor market, a huge gender disparity. In Liberia, labor participation ratios between men and women are very comparable. When you look at the number of hours spent on work, they're also very comparable. But when you look at the earnings, men are earning almost twice as much money as women are earning for the same kind of work they do, particularly in the formal sector. So an opportunity like this, like the EPAG project as a design, is also market-driven. That is, we assess the labor market. For example, you look at the design. It's well known that we have fewer opportunities in the formal sector as compared to the informal sector, so we made a lot of investment in the informal sector. And the training is high quality. There are standards set across the entire training, for example, on what a training venue should be like. So we have indicators, we have quality indicators, minimum that have to be satisfied before we can accredit a particular facility to serve as a training venue. So this project has provided resilience to buffer the many challenges that young people face, and it's a good opportunity to help. It has been a good opportunity to help young girls to escape poverty. So 30% of the trainees were in job skills, and one of the things we fought to do with the job skills design is to ensure that we departed from gender stereotypes about the types of work that women should do. Because over the years, there have been gender stereotypes about what kind of work a woman would do. For example, tailoring, sewing, soap making. But this time, we're training girls to be house painters. We're training girls to be security guards. I mean, a major shift. And then realizing the huge labor market potential in the informal sector, we did a lot in business development so that it helps with self-employment. There's a design of rigorous impact evaluation and high-quality monitoring. Of course, it's experimental design with baseline, midline, and endline, and then we have randomization. And then we also had a mandate to do a lot of capacity building for the government ministry that the project is situated in, and also with various partners working on the project. So we were working basically with 4 NGOs. So the implementation of the project is coordinated by the Ministry of Gender, and then the delivery of the training services were outsourced to various NGOs. So we had 2 international NGOs, and then we also had 2 local NGOs providing the services. So what were some of the achievements in this project? We set out to reach 2,500 girls. We were almost there. 99.6% of the target was reached in the overall coverage of the project. Attendance and completion rates were really fascinating. Average training attendance rate was more than 90%, and the average completion rate was also over 95%. Placement rate, 81.6% of all of the girls who were trained in the project were placed by the NGOs into jobs, and then they were also facilitated to establish a small micro enterprises. So preliminary results from the impact evaluations are filtering in. I thought to share this interesting slide so that we see the significant impact of the project on the target population, as my brother explained. So for the, in terms of employment, we have more than 50% employment in the treatment group as compared to the control group, because for the treatment group, employment rose from 39% to 67%. But then when you disaggregate into business and job skills, you also see, like I indicated, a huge potential for finding employment opportunities in self-employment as compared to wage employment. So you can see the 52% and the 76%, which provides a strong incentive for investment in the informal sector. Weekly earnings more than doubled. The actual figure is about 115% increase in the weekly earning among treatment group as compared to the control group. And again, savings, the project was deliberate in opening local savings accounts for all of the participants in the local banks, and we also saw that reflecting in terms of the big difference in the savings among the participating girls and the control girls. What were some of the key lessons learned over the 3 years of this project? 1, quality monitoring. Monitoring was really essential really very essential, but it involved the service providers. We worked along with the service provider throughout the entire phases of the project, from design to close-up of the project. Recruitment should be informed by the demographics. Initially, the targets we set out, they were not realistic to the demographic realities in the communities. So we struggle a lot to balance our target in order to reach a total number of girls. Literacy, we wanted girls who had some basic literacy because the project was intensive, but in the community, literacy was very low among the girls. And we would say that you want to start a training project like that, you make sure you want to design and pre-test a training curriculum before getting started. And you do a project where you're facilitating self-employment, and for us, we didn't have any provision for inputs and capital. That was a major challenge for girls making the transition from the classroom into micro enterprises. So we identify 16 enablers that we call performance-enhancing strategies, quality monitoring, performance-based payments. Most of the payments we made to the service providers, it was based on deliverables. So as the deliverables come, we make payment. But among the various enhancement strategies, I want to talk a little more about quality monitoring. Monitoring, we feel from our experience, if it is based on these 4 key principles, they facilitate the work, they enhance capacity building, and you will see the results from the interventions that will be made. Mutual respect and trust. Making sure that the monitors don't go to the communities or they don't go to the service providers and begin to intimidate or serve as bosses, because we are all colleagues working with a common aim. And then transparency and equity. Being clear about all of the dealings and making documents and budgets open to the service providers so that they know. Capacity building, training of the monitors, and then working along to also build the capacities of the service providers is an opportunity for helping them improve their own performance. And then the broad participation of all teams. You need to engage all of the teams. Once this is happening, there will be synergy of efforts. And people will be familiar with the entire project, not just their own, but they look at their single project through the entire framework of the whole project. So with these results that have been achieved through this project, when I reflect on the general theme of this conference, I think it resonates very well. Resilience and opportunity. Once people are provided the opportunity, it lays a platform to escape poverty. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Korkoyah, for making it on time. Again, very, very interesting presentation of a very good program. I think you made a number of points that to me were very important. You mentioned the importance of complementing the vocational trainings also with access to assets or credit or even some sort of grants, that this complementary is important in order to transition successfully to self-employment. So it's not enough only to invest in knowledge. It's important to give them something else. But still, on the skills component, you also emphasize the importance of accreditation. So it's important that when we think about these schemes, there's also some sort of accreditation that allows the market to recognize the quality of the trainings, which is important, obviously, for a signal for the employers. Eventually, in the future, if they want to transition beyond self-employment. So, in a very last point that I also took, especially in a post-conflict setting, you mentioned the importance of having the government coordination among the different players. So you had different NGOs, but there was an important role of coordination among the different partners, which seems especially important in this post-conflict setting. So if you agree, we would just open the floor for discussion, and you are all welcome to come and join us in the microphone for questions, thoughts. Feel free just to present yourself in the mics and have your thoughts on these 3 very interesting presentations.
Not working.
Thank you very much for very interesting presentations we just heard. I have 3 quick questions. My first question is pertaining to the targeting. How these programs are targeting the right trainees for the skill development and the skill training. And my second question is like a big comment, and also I want to get a reply from you. Providing training might not be a difficult challenge, but the biggest challenge is the access to employment or market access, where they can use their training and get the right job, and in the longer term they can earn for their household or family. What these countries are doing for a generation of employment after providing them a training or skill development. And my third question is that you didn't touch about the impact on poverty line. What kind of impact these programs have on your poverty line? Because you're putting money and a lot of budget and in these programs. There should be an impact on the poverty line after providing the skills and the self-employment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please introduce yourselves when you present your question.
Thank you. My name is Amin Sokha. I'm from Cambodia. I work for the National Employment Agency. As you have do your presentation that our country also face some kind of that problem and also challenges. I had 2 questions, one for Ms. Elka. In terms of providing skill training for people, for youths, does the private sector participate in that training or not? Because when the private sector participate in that training, they also know that what kind of skill they needed, and also assign for the training provider to develop their schedule according to the demand in the labor market in terms of demand and supply. Yes. And for second, for Mr. Timothy, that you have raised that the target group also target for the poor and for the youth, but the poorest does not in your target. Why that the poorest people does not in your target? Because they're supposed to be the group that the most vulnerable group in the country. If we haven't target them or provide them some sort of like support, they could not get out of the poverty lines, and also they also string to their kids from generation to generation. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take one more. Okay.
Thank you.
Don't worry.
So my name is Siro Komesli. I'm a team leader of one of the HI projects in Nepal. My question goes to Mr. Korkoyah. I was impressed by the results of your project, and my question would be, so what will the government of Liberia now do with that? Meaning, what future interventions are you planning to do based on the success of this project? Thank you.
Let me just give the chance to the presenters to reply to these first 3 sets of questions, and then we will do another round. Thank you so much. Mr. Lubanga, do you want to go first? We'll just go sequentially.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the questions. Let me start with the most straightforward one. Why are the poorest left out of the targeting? Actually, our intention at the start of this program was to target the poorest. And that's why this program is part of a bigger social fund. We have a social fund called Northern Uganda Social Action Fund, NUSAF. We created a component specifically to target the poorest. We called it Vulnerable Group Support Program. The intention was that a special intervention should be given to the poorest to enable them graduate to some level before they can actually benefit from others like public works and other components of the project. But the reality is that extremely poor people are very difficult to reach. And because this is a demand-driven program, they don't come out. Let me give you an example. If you find a girl who was raped at the age of 10 years and abducted, and she produced 2 kids in the bush, and she's traumatized, she's sick, she's everything, every bad thing. So when you're doing the community mobilization, she doesn't come out. She doesn't come out of the meeting. She's not interested. She needs help first to deal with the trauma before she can actually pick interest in registering to access this program. So those categories of people kind of naturally get left out. And unfortunately, that's what we experienced. So a lot of the poorest groups that we initially targeted could not, you pass the information in the local trading centers and churches that there's this opportunity. We want a group of youth to come out and you can get trained and you can get a skill. So please come and express interest. Those poorest naturally get left out, unfortunately. The first question was, I think, to all of us, and I can quickly respond to what I can. How are the programs being targeted? I think in our case, first, geographically, there was geographical targeting because the program was specific to a couple of districts where this kind of youth were present. Then we employed community-based targeting, as I explained, where communities themselves, through a participatory planning meeting, would identify what they consider the type of young youth who should benefit. Those who dropped guns, those who have never had education, and because of the war they were displaced and so on. So it was community-based targeting and geographical targeting in our case. And then the question of access to market, how do we support them? This is a very big question. This is a huge challenge. That beyond providing the skill and the asset, how do you help them access market? What we tried to do under the program was that, for example, the youth who have been trained in masonry and building skills and so on would eventually be supported by civil society organizations to access some of the contracts, like to build classroom blocks, to make desks and benches for children in the new schools being built, because the whole area was undergoing rehabilitation. So there was a component financing infrastructure, and we tried to link the skills training for them to benefit. But even that is complicated because, it's still tendered out. The schools still kind of contract out who's going to provide the furniture. And it is very difficult for these youth groups to compete with established providers. So it's still a challenge, but that's what we tried. But there are examples of actually a number of them that graduated and started producing. For example, in a northern town called Gulu in my country, now we realize some of the youth that were trained under this program are producing maize in large scale and actually selling to World Food Program. So over time they graduated and they accessed credit and they became commercial farmers. So there are groups that actually pick out. And then the last one, effect on the poverty line. Again, all I can say here is that for us, there has been a larger reduction in poverty in that part of the country than in the rest of the country. But also, excuse me, the poverty there was much higher. It was much higher in the north. So maybe it was just obvious that the reduction would be higher there, or because of these interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Korkoyah.
Thank you. I would like to start with the last question from my colleague from Nepal, you said. All right. So what we've seen, this result, the government has received it with gladness, and there's a lot of enthusiasm in the government. We acknowledge that this is a pilot project. So we were asking ourselves several questions. For example, what is it that works best when it comes to working with adolescent girls? What kind of program will yield the best results? And we managed to have seen that this particular design produced results that are really profound. So one of the things that has happened in terms of structural change, an adolescent girls unit has been established in the Ministry of Gender. So the mandate of that unit is to ensure that adolescent girls' issues and concerns remains paramount on the government development agenda, to ensure issues of policy formulation and to coordinate various partners who are working in addressing adolescent girls' issues. So we're talking about scaling up this project because this is an urban project. We ran the project basically in the capital city and then in the suburbs of the capital city and one of the counties. So the group of people we're working with in this project, they do not necessarily reflect the population of young people across the country because we know young people are highly heterogeneous, so we can't make any generalization. One of the mandates that this unit has is to do a nationwide assessment so that when we think about moving, for example, in the east of the country where the social economic realities are different, we are well informed as to the kind of design or the adjustment we can make in the core design of this project so that it is market-driven, it meets the prevailing challenges or the prevailing realities within those places. So in terms of what the government is doing, that is exactly what the government is doing. The pilot has come to an end, and again, because the results are appealing, they're convincing. Right now, we're in negotiation with CEDA. CEDA wants to make some investments, so we move into another county. So that's what the government is doing. The government right now, they're prioritizing this project, and they want to move it to other parts of the country. Even the girls who have benefited, those are appeals that they have made. How do we make sure that this project moves to other parts of the country? So basically, that's the way the government is, has received the results and the plans that are on our way to make sure that this initiative is scaled up across the entire country. So talking about private sector, I know he directed a question particularly to you, but there was also an enormous, an important private sector component of this project. This is one project that has helped to promote public-private partnership. For example, in terms of the selection of skills training, we were informed by the private sector. In Liberia right now, we are having a big boost in the hotel industry. So we're training in hotel management, we're training in hospitality, we're training in professional cleaning. Because hoteliers, people who are running various institutions are telling us these are the places that girls will be able to find some work. More than that, we have what we call private sector working group. So we work along with the private sector. They even help us to identify placement for the girls. That leads me to the next question about ensuring access to the market. So one of the innovative designs that we have in this project is what we call withheld incentive payment. So the total budget submitted by an NGO, 10% of that budget is withheld by the ministry. The entire project runs for about 1 year. So you have 12 months of classroom training, and then you have 12 months to help these girls transition from work to the world of work. So usually we say help them to transition from learning to earning. So if you train 500 persons, right, we want to make sure that after that training you work along with these girls to help them to find jobs. This is where the private sector also comes in. So the private sector working group has helped us, has helped the service provider to build the necessary linkages with private sector organizations that are responding in terms of placing these girls to work along with the macro franchises that are helping to provide market opportunity for these girls. So there's a kind of strong link that we have. Now, what we do with our withheld incentive payments that serve as a big motivation for the service providers to work overtime. If you train these girls and you only reported that you've placed this number of people, we have a mechanism for verification. So we take a sample of the total number of girls that you have reported to be placed. It's a 25% sample, and we actually go there. We go to the various businesses, to the shops, and check and make sure that those girls are placed. And we're also able to triangulate that information because we're not just checking with the girls. We're checking with the employers. We're checking with the supervisors. We're checking even with their colleagues and their coaches. So the results we achieve, if we establish based on the verification findings that only 85% of these girls are placed, when we extrapolate that and it says 85%, then the total money that we have for you will only give you 85% of that money. If we establish that it's 20%, you only get 20% of the 10% of your budget. If you had a budget of 1 million, 10% is a lot, right? So that serves as a huge motivation that after the training, all of the service providers are ensuring that they help these girls to transition to find jobs. Yeah, I think I just want to.
Thank you very much. Mrs.
First of all, I would like to say that the targeting is very important, because it is important to know the main characteristics of the special target group for the program, because every group is different. For example, we prepared a program for training for young women from the Roma minority, but the participation in the training was very low because young women have small children and who will look after the children when the mother participates in the courses. So we adapt the program to the needs of the group. And the access to the labor market, this is the possibility to pay all expenses, because if you will participate in a training, we need to pay the bus ticket. For the poor people, sometimes the dilemma is to buy a bus ticket and to go to the next town and for the training or to buy food with this money this day. So we cover the expenses for the transport, also for the accommodation if it is needed, and we give daily allowance to the participants. And sometimes they expect the first payment because it is twice per month, and they don't have money to cover their expenses. But we cannot give the money in advance because it is calculated in dependence of the day of the training. Each day of training we give €4. It is not a big sum, but important for the poor people. And after the training, we provide subsidized employment or employment in the private sector, but in Bulgaria the minimum wage is fixed, and this wage is twice higher than the poverty line. That is why the employment, subsidized or not, it is sure during this period that the person will have some money for the expenses, but the problem is the sustainability, because sometimes the subsidized employment is temporary. During the summer, also the seasonal factor in Bulgaria is very important. The seasonal employment is big, and the sustainability is the more important problem. Also, the training is important because people with higher skills and higher qualification, their chance to receive a stable, quality, well-paid job is bigger. Also, I will answer the question of the colleague from Cambodia. We try to involve in the process of the training, the private sector, through the employer organization. They are nationally representative. Now 4 employer organizations are representative. Also, we have 2 trade unions. We invite their representative in the commission for the exams after the training, also in the elaboration of the curriculum and the labor standards that are used during the training. We have big discussion in Bulgaria because the business often says the education is so far away from our needs, we cannot find qualified labor force, we would like to import and so on. It is true, but the university have their autonomy and they have idea how to teach, what to teach and so on. So we have now a big number of lawyer, also experts in marketing, in some legislation, also history, letters and so on, but the lack of engineers, technicians in Bulgaria is big now, and this is a problem for us. So we would like to the representative of the private sector because this is the way to have adapted to the need of the market trainings, and the chance of the unemployed after such a training to find job is bigger.
Thank you very much. I think we still have time to 2 more questions. I'll ask you just to be very brief when you're answering them. Please go ahead. Let's do 3 more questions.
Good day. I say in Russia. Буду говорить на русском языке. Меня зовут Жакитова Шолпан. Я работаю заместителем директора Департамента социальной помощи Министерства труда и социальной защиты населения Республики Казахстан. Я из Казахстана, то есть страны постсоветского пространства. У меня вопрос точечный вот именно к Димитровой елке. У нас в Казахстане реализуется сейчас программа занятости 2020. Эта программа рассчитана до 2020 года. Данная программа, она реализуется по 4 направлениям. Первое направление – это вот профобучение, переподготовка кадров. Второе направление – это направление микрокредитования. Вот то, что вы сейчас нам как бы презентовали. У нас микрокредитование охватывает, в основном, в первую очередь, направлено на сельское население, на самозанятую часть населения. Что такое самозанятое, вы знаете. В Казахстане самозанятые люди – это люди, которые заняты развитием личного подсобного хозяйства. То бишь это скотина, да, и огород, дачные участки. Сумма кредита у нас составляет 3 миллиона тенге или 20 тысяч долларов США сроком на 5 лет под залог. Вот у меня сразу вопрос такой. У вас, вы сказали, грант дается безвозмездно, да, 13 тысяч долларов. Сумма кредита какова, процент какой и на какой период? И даете ли вы это под залог? Хотела бы дать справочно такую информацию. В Казахстане, значит, доля самозанятого населения составляет 33%. Сейчас перед нами правительство поставило задачу долю самозанятого населения снизить путем вовлечения самозанятого населения в продуктивную занятость. То есть очень много самозанятого, которые работают в неформальном секторе, опять повторюсь, да, занятые развитием личного подсобного хозяйства. И вот именно этой категории населения, да, дается вот это вот микрокредитование. Уровень безработицы в Казахстане составляет 5,2%, 5%, да, и наша задача этот уровень безработицы никоим образом не увеличить, а продержать на уровне 5%. Охват у нас как бы это, есть у нас нормативно-правовое как бы регулирование, в первую очередь это закон о занятости. Сейчас у нас в рамках реализации данной программы дополнительно будет совершенствоваться законодательная база в плане того, что будет принят закон о социальных рабочих местах, это временные рабочие места сроком до 6 лет. Также вот хотелось бы отметить, что вот в рамках программы занятости до 2020 года по первому направлению профобучения у нас там как раз есть такая программа, как значит, создание социальных рабочих мест сроком на 6 месяцев. Это временная занятость. И создание рабочих мест для молодежи тоже сроком на 6 месяцев. То есть это опять же для того, чтобы молодежь вовлечь на первоначальном этапе, как бы привлечь к труду и потом дать возможность, шанс пойти дальше, трудоустроиться на постоянное рабочее место. Я, наверное, коротенько, может быть, скажу про нашу программу. Да? У нас третье вот направление в этой программе, очень хорошее такое направление, переселение из сел с низким экономическим потенциалом в точки высокого экономического потенциала с предоставлением жилья. Вот это вот у нас в Казахстане такое есть. Ну вот первый вопрос я сказала, я тогда вопросы скажу. Вот первый вопрос я сказала, да, сумма кредита. Второй, критерии отбора, какие у вас? И ваучеры, даются ли только на обучение, ваучер, вы сказали ваучер, и программа, на какие годы рассчитана, и какой результат, эффект, какой будет от реализации данной программы. Вы же как-то индикатор какой-то сделали.
I'll have to ask you just to keep to one question, please, just for fairness for the others. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair, for this opportunity. Let me say that these are beautiful presentations and that we have similar initiatives in Malawi. My name is Yusuf Alide from Malawi. I am responsible for a training authority. Mine is not a question, but an experience to share, particularly with my colleague from Uganda. He did cite limited capacity of service providers as a challenge. We had a similar situation in Malawi for a particular project, which was training young men and women who were orphans, vulnerable, and affected youths. In this particular project, we were to train 2,510, and this has...
Can you push the microphone just a little bit up? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And this project, we have completed it this year, earlier this year. Out of the 2,510, we had 600 that went under formal, and then 1,900 through informal. Now, in the informal, due to limited capacity, we had to involve master craftsmen in training. What we did was to attach our trainees to master craftsmen after identifying them and then giving them pedagogical skills. And the project was successful. One very good example is that one of the graduates is in South Africa working as a supervisor. Very successful example. You may want to try that one. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. One last observation. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for your presentations and sharing your experience. My name is Samir from Palestine. I work for Directorate General of Technical and Vocational Education Development in the Ministry of Higher Education. My question is for Ms. Elka. Don't you think that you need to make career guidance and counseling for designing a business plan before starting a business plan? Because your block diagram was very interesting, but I think that it needs a career guidance and counseling before starting this business plan, and what measures you do in your country to ensure that this right job is for the right person. Second, for all of you, because you told us that the relevancy is a major challenge, how can you ensure that these conducted programs are relevant to labor market needs, taking into account that surveys and statistics, which I mean the training need assessments, is not enough to ensure that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask you, the three of you, to be very brief in the responses. please, let's start again with, well, let's start with Mrs. Dimitrova.
Thank you. In brief, I would answer my Russian from Kazakhstan colleagues. We can continue to discuss in the lunch break also, but this grant about $16,000, the rule is that the future entrepreneur keep the activities during 1 year and hire 2 additional persons. This is the rules to receive this grant. This is a grant. But there are also schemes for loans provided by a state bank, the Bank for Development, and the interest is lower than the other banks. So it is good to take a loan from this bank for small and medium-sized enterprises only. I agree that about the vouchers, this scheme is now in action, so we didn't till now evaluate the results. But as it is funded by the European Social Fund, it is obligatory to evaluate. And after the end, after 1 year, we will have this evaluation. I agree with the colleague that the guidance is very important. In this scheme, the guidance isn't provided, but we will create now with funding from the European Social Fund 10 guiding centers for career development. Also, they can give some advices for future development of the person, but we have career centers in the biggest universities in Bulgaria for guidance of the students. And most of them also think about future small business to become entrepreneurs. As you know, young people is innovative, courageous, and they think for the future like future entrepreneurs. So the guidance is very important.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to make a brief comment on your question about alignment of the interventions with surveys and statistics. And I mean, that's really relevant. If you don't do that, you might miss target the entire intervention. In our case in Liberia, during the initiation of the EPAG project, we conducted an assessment called the Girls Vulnerability Assessment. So that assessment, the findings from that assessment were very critical in informing the design of the project. Let's look at 2 issues. For example, the assessment clearly showed that child care, as my colleague mentioned, was a major concern for girls. Because right from and they came out in the baseline survey, 70% of the girls, adolescent girls in our project already had at least 1 kid. So we provided for child care. So in each training venue, we had a child care facility where the girls would come and leave their children, and we had child care we had like toys, minimum provision for the children who would stay in the child care facility while the girls in the training. One of the things we also found from the vulnerability assessment was the prevalence of sexual exploitation and abuse in most training programs, particularly from male trainers harassing and abusing the trainees. So some of our initial plan was to ensure that all of our trainees were 100% females. But when it comes to the job skills training, it was a challenge. We couldn't find all of the skill set among females. But we ensured that in each class you have 1 male trainer and a female trainer. So that's how the design was informed by some of the assessments. Thanks.
Thank you. For the advice from Malawi, thank you very much. We have taken note. We'll follow it up. And finally, the last question was, how do we ensure that these programs are relevant? I think that's the question. I have 3 quick answers or proposals. One is that you have to do a market research or market analysis. That's something we are planning to do. And really understand what skills are needed out there and in what quantities. That is quite important because at the beginning of the first phase of the program, we didn't do that. We didn't have time for that. We were going to experiment and we had so many things to deal with. But now we realize we need to understand what skills are marketable and are useful out there. So market analysis is one way of ensuring relevance. The second is including the private sector. And I think this has been mentioned by other presenters earlier. Because the private sector is the one which employs, the private sector is the one which contracts, the private sector plays a huge role, it supplies the materials and so on. So involvement of the private sector is very central in this. Because at the end of the day, as government, you only provide the skill, give the asset and go away. The person is left there in the wilderness to deal with the private sector, with private life. So involvement of the private sector in planning is really central. I think that also helps. Then the last one is, yes, decision making is from the demand side. And so the trainees, the beneficiaries themselves have a big role in terms of deciding what they think is useful and important, what will help them. That also makes the program relevant. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much to all of you for the participation, but especially to you for sharing your very interesting experiences. I won't attempt to summarize the discussion or the thoughts. It's too much. I would just like to conclude with my own perception, very quick perception of the three presentations. I think we all of us leave with the idea that probably there's no one-size-fits-all solution, that there's a lot of diversity in this target population of the self-employed, but once we are designing this type of interventions, one thing is needed, it's very good screening of what are the needs, and we shouldn't focus only on vocational trainings, but we should think of other complementary supports, services or assets, eventually credit or grants to complement that supporting knowledge. I think it was also highlighted the importance of involving the private sector, not only in definition of the trainings, exactly to make sure these are aligned with the market needs, but also in the provision of these trainings. And finally, it also came up consistently, especially in the example of Uganda and Liberia, the importance of having a good monitoring and information system that also feeds into the decision making. So thanks everyone for the participation, and let's just enjoy the break and continue the discussion. Thanks a lot.